So I'm Henry Cook and I work for the North Wales Wildlife Trust. Thanks to Richard at Cofnod for inviting me to speak today, and thanks to all of you for listening. I'm going to talk about camera traps and their use for nocturnal wildlife recording. You may have had some experience yourselves or not. If you've not, then there'll be lots of new information in here for you. Hopefully there's also some useful tips and information for people who have used camera traps before, but I'm going to talk about the development of camera traps, setting them, and give you some examples of data we've recorded with camera traps from right around North Wales, so some of the more interesting findings. Camera traps are also known as trail cameras, and that name sort of has developed from their use as a tool for hunters, and it's one of the original reasons they were developed 30 years ago. Recent years has seen a big increase in popularity though, and that has come as the price has fallen, but also the range of products has grown to suit every type of user. Camera traps are passive recorders, so you put them up and they record wildlife without you needing to be there. One of the big advantages of that, of course, is nocturnal wildlife is very shy and we're often not out there at the right times of day to record it. So this is a really useful tool in our inventory for monitoring wildlife. They work in the day and at night, thanks to infrared beams. They can get pretty good images of wildlife at night, and this is one of their greatest uses. So the benefits of camera traps, why are they good? And why do we use them so much? Well, they generate verifiable data. So the images that are produced can be passed on to recording bodies such as Cofnod for verification. This way we make sure the data is of a high standard. And they generate far more data than in-person recording. I've already touched upon that. But were we to use things like cameras that require lights, as Danny has shown, that would affect some wildlife and we wouldn't record them. It doesn't disturb the wildlife compared to in-person monitoring, such as live trapping. So if you were to set a pitfall trap, say for mammals and things, small mammals, then you'd have to go and collect that. They've lost out time in terms of feeding and carrying on their lives. So it's a passive recording method. It's also a useful method for monitoring behaviour. On like scientific studies, or if there's concerns about issues affecting certain species, it's a useful technique for that. And I've put a picture up on the right here of the tern colony at Cemlyn Lagoon on Anglesey, and the North Wales Wildlife Trust now use trail cameras routinely on the islands as a monitoring tool for predation issues. You may remember a few years ago that the whole colony got up and deserted, and this was thought to be due to otters, although I'm not sure we had camera traps out at the time, but there were anecdotal sightings quite frequently of otter and lots of field signs. And camera traps have been a big boost to nocturnal recording. So before that, certain species would have to use other methods to detect them, and quite often with mammals that might mean things like roadkill. And things like roadkill still make up quite a big proportion of mammal records, but the potential for camera traps to collect records of animals undergoing their normal routine is really great. So camera traps are mostly used by researchers, conservationists and increasingly hobbyists. That's as their price has fallen and their ease of use has increased dramatically. It can be used as a general recording tool just to see what's around, the range of species you might have, but it could be used more formally as a monitoring tool for conservation, so we can deploy them routinely and use that as a method to see the range of species present, but also how frequently they're recorded and maybe even how many individuals are in a population. So as I mentioned, they're useful for species richness monitoring, but they're particularly good at capturing rare and shy species. And this is because they're out potentially for weeks on end, and they may just capture one sighting of a species, rare mammal, for example, such as an otter or a polecat or something, and that you wouldn't get if you were present yourself and hoping for a sighting. They're useful for recording disturbance and predation. I previously showed you the tern slide, but also here the picture on the right, this is of a barn owl that was captured by a camera trap on a feeding station in the dunes at Cofnod. This is put up as part of the Little Tern project that I used to work with. And we use this as a method to record what was coming to take food from the feeding station. And we weren't expecting a barn owl. It didn't actually take anything on this occasion, but we didn't even know there was barn owls around. So that just goes to show the value of recording rare and shy species. So I'm going to talk a bit about how camera traps work. They're made up of several interesting developments that all come together to provide the pictures that I've been showing so far. They are waterproof. They have housing that's designed to keep moisture and humidity out. Although that doesn't always work 100%, but the newer ones tend to be very good at that. They use batteries, so we don't need to have a mains power source. This enables the traps to go up in very remote locations. They contain a digital camera to collect the pictures, and these pictures are collected by the triggering of a sensor that detects motion. So if it was recording constantly, you'd fill up a memory card very quickly, whereas this can adapt it to only taking photos when wildlife is present. Although depending on where you set it, you may get things like swaying branches and grass triggering the camera quite often. So that it works at night, they contain infrared beams. This gives you sort of black and white images, but still good enough for recording in most circumstances. And some of the more expensive models even have inbuilt Wi-Fi and other features, such as pre-recording the motion of an animal. So let's say an animal quickly runs past and you want a nice video from it. If you missed a few seconds before, it can look like a very rushed video. So some of the more fancy models can pre-record part of the footage for you. So the types of camera trap, I'm going to talk to you about a range of traps that I've trialed or had recommended to me. But it comes down to a number of features, and there's several different price brackets for these, which I'll mention in a moment. How quickly the batteries are used up, the field of view of images, the range of the trap, so how far away will it trigger, and how quickly will the camera trap trigger. But like I say, some of the fancier models can get around that by constantly recording footage and having it ready, but only saving it when it's required. And finally, the overall quality of the footage. So some of the newer models have really good quality cameras in now, and the technology just keeps improving rapidly. So as well as the camera trap, you will need some accessories. Most take 8 AA batteries, and I recommend the rechargeable ones. A new set of batteries does last quite a long time, potentially a few months, but when it comes around to putting it out again, I think it's more environmentally friendly to have rechargeables. They will need a charger, and also you'll need a memory card, and majority of camera traps take up to 32GB memory cards in SD format. It's a very common format now. And most camera traps will come with straps to attach them to trees or posts. But also a lot have a foot on them that can attach to tripods as well. So that offers you a range of methods to attach them. Here's a little table I put together showing some of the price brackets and a few recommendations of different models. I'm not being paid commission by any of these companies, so it's just a few of my recommendations from personal experience. In the budget bracket, you've got the little Acorn, the 5210A model. It gets good photos, it's really small, and just about gets HD video actually as well. So for its size and its price, this is a good one. In the mid-range, I'd recommend the Bushnell Nature View. These have a good range on them for recording mammals at a distance. Good photo quality again, although the video quality is slightly lacking, so this is perhaps a better camera for stills. Also the mid-range, I've mentioned Browning trail cams. The reason I've not suggested any models here is that there's a huge range of models, not only from Browning, but across the spectrum in this middle price range of £100 to £200. This is kind of where the majority of trail cameras lie in terms of price. And then at the high end, you can end up spending an awful lot of money on a trail cam, and it improves the quality of footage you get, how well constructed the cameras are, so they probably last a long time. And in this bracket, you've got the Bushnell Core range, which gets 30 megapixel photos, so you know, as good as top-end digital SLR cameras even, and triggers very fast indeed. So here's a picture of the little Acorn. As you can see in someone's hand, it's really tiny. This makes it useful for deploying in maybe more public settings where you want the camera trap to remain unnoticed. The Bushnell Nature View, this is camera I've used a lot. I should add at this point that my project was fortunate to get a couple of these cameras thanks to Cofnod and their biological recording grants program. So in return for these cameras, I've submitted lots of records from around the areas I work. And there's the Bushnell Core. It's got this added cover on it to help it blend in, camouflage, and range of sensors, but it comes at a very high price. So setting camera traps, you need to clear the memory card first, recommend formatting it, insert your fully charged batteries, and then you can turn it on to quickly test it. But the nature views here, as you can see in the image, have a setting for setup mode, and that's when you use the inbuilt screen and the menu system to fine-tune your settings. You can set the date and time, and that'll often be stamped on the images, which is handy for recording purposes. You can set the mode. Do you want it on video or photo mode? And if you set it on video, you can set the length of recording, so you can set it in sort of 10-second bursts or longer than that, depending on what you're trying to capture. And you can also change the quality. The only downside to setting high quality is it will fill up your memory card faster. So on-site placement of camera traps, this is really important for successful deployment. Putting a bit of time and effort in and thinking about the thing you're trying to capture, how will they behave in the environment? If it's a mammal, they'll probably tend to move along corridors. If you're trying to capture bats, it may be located at a roost site or something like that. So where you put the camera trap determines what you will get. To improve your chances of successfully recording things, we occasionally use bait, and I'll go on to talk about that in a moment. But it's important to secure your camera trap well and quite firmly. If your camera trap's shaking, it's going to trigger all the time and waste footage and battery life. So the straps that get sent with the traps, it's good to have them really firm. Or if it's on a tripod, make sure that's out of a windy location and somewhere it's not going to blow over. So for a few different locations, I've suggested potential sort of target species and then the bait you can use to help track that. So if you're in a river or stream location and you're hoping to collect footage of water voles, I found apple juice or even slices of apple work well. You might get a situation where a water vole comes in and it's looking around for the apple if you've got apple juice, but and it can't find any. So apples may be a nicer thing to offer. For otter, you know, they don't tend to be too fussy. If they're in the area, there's a good chance a camera trap will get footage. But if you want to really encourage them in, sardines might be a good way to do that. And then in woodlands or gardens, so you know, most people have a garden, and in North Wales there's good badger populations, so there's a chance you might get badgers in your garden. I know they dig up the lawns, but it's worth having for the honour and prestige. But if you want to track them in, you're best off using something like peanut butter. And then for garden birds, you can put camera traps at feeders. Of course, that's more of a diurnal thing. But as the photo showed earlier in the talk, we captured a barn owl by having a trap by a feeder, so you can get some interesting sightings. And then near the ground, again, for hedgehogs, similar to badgers, but wet cat or dog food works well and is popular with the hedgehogs. I've also put in here heathland spot, a basking spot for adders. You don't need to bait those. Those tend to be sort of traditional basking sites. So if you find a nice open patch, a small open patch within heathland on a sunny exposed slope, there's a chance you'll get adders probably in the next couple of months, really, coming out of hibernation. So just to show you actually baiting a site, this was a river, a little stream on Anglesey. We had camera traps up last year, no, 2 years ago now, and we put down apple juice. The camera was put up first, so it actually captured the moment we put down the apple juice for the water voles. And here's a picture of a sort of open rolling landscape that we get in parts of North Wales. And I'm just trying to think here, where would you put a camera trap here if you were looking to record mammals and things, or terrestrial mammals in particular? And I would suggest, you know, at the edge of the field here is where you've got the best chance. You've already got a route that might be being used by mammals. If you just put the camera trap out in the middle of the field, low down, you're just going to capture vegetation. Maybe you might get a field vole or something, but along the edge of the field would probably be best. And in this setting, there's not many trees, so you might have to put in a post or a pole or something to attach your camera trap to. And then when your camera trap's been out for a number of weeks or even months, it's time to collect them in. You turn the setting to off on the trap and then remove the SD card. And then the real fun begins, where you get to go through your images. I think there is some software out there now that can go through footage or images and sort of take out the images that where motion has been detected, rather than sort of false positives, where you do get where nothing seems to be in the image. That's partially down to the location you've chosen, but also the sensitivity of the sensor, which you can change in the settings. But generally, you will have to go through the images manually, and it is quite a fun process. If you're going to collect footage of wildlife this way, it's good to record the species, times and dates so that you can upload to the Cofnod database. I thought I'd give a little plug there, Richard. But yeah, going through the footage takes a while, and there's some highs, but there's also a lot of sort of going through images where not much happens. It's important to not stare at the images for too long, or else you might end up looking like Mr. Robot here from off of the telly. Some issues with camera traps I thought I'd let you know about. It can take a while to perfect the settings, so maybe don't deploy a camera trap straight away if you've just got one for a few months, because you might get it in and then you've got nothing usable. Put it out for a few nights, see how that goes, take it in, have a look, and maybe just change the settings. Here's an image you can see on the right where the sensor was set too high, so and I think the vegetation was too close, so it's overexposed the image. And you get this sort of blown image. There is actually a fox there on the left-hand side, so it was still useful for a record, but not a particularly attractive image. Sometimes cameras can become a bit fogged up with condensation. There's not a lot you can do about that other than maybe where you place it. If it becomes a repeated problem, they may need looking at and checking over to see if there's a sort of gap in the housing that's letting in moisture. The weather, so high wind or rain can reduce detections, and that is all down to the placement, really. If you can keep it in a sheltered location, you're most likely to reduce the number of sort of false positives or things like grass moving. And then, as I touched upon, security. If it's in a public place, you want to keep it kind of out of the way. Although they come in colours like green and browns, they are a bit noticeable if they're near public rights of way. So for the sake of not having your camera trap stolen, I would move it off a track. But if it's on private land, if it's your own land, that's absolutely fine. But if it's the land of someone else, always get the permission of the landowner. And if you're looking to take footage of certain species, you may need a license. For example, rare birds might require a Schedule 1 license to use. And it's worth me adding that all the pictures in this talk where we've had them with Schedule 1 breeding birds were taken under license. So using the camera traps around the Anglesey fens, this is why I originally got a couple of traps from Cofnod to record particularly the mammals around the Anglesey fens a couple of years ago. Here's a few examples that I'll just rattle through. So there's a hedgehog. I've cropped this image, it was a bit distant, but this was coming in quite regularly eventually to dog food, I think. And the landowner was really pleased to confirm he had hedgehogs on his land. But whilst they were set at this site, it also recorded a bat species, probably a pipistrelle, but it's perhaps not the best monitoring tool for bats. Of course, as Dan mentioned, these echolocators, so the specialist equipment, audio recording equipment for that, but just happened to catch that bat. And you can't have a camera trap up on Anglesey without recording red squirrels, almost by accident. Pretty much every project site I had the cameras out on had red squirrels, so it was really nice to see, and kind of cuteness overload there. But then we also got some less expected species. So this was a water rail at that same site previously where we'd hoped to capture water voles. And then thanks to this sighting of the water rail, a type of crake, we searched the nearby marsh it was placed at and managed to confirm water rail breeding there, which was a new breeding site. So it led to a really interesting record there. And you get some accidental shots. This is a juvenile swallow hawking over a meadow. We'd put this camera trap out hoping for large mammals, but you get some sort of bycatch in a way. You get things like this swallow. And then I'm going to show you a few examples from around the rest of North Wales, thanks to some of my colleagues for these images. So this is a badger that was captured last year at Gwaith Powder by Rob. So it's foraging out in the edge of a meadow here. And then a really exciting find, this was a polecat near Mould by Johnny. And he's lucky enough to have polecats regularly on his land, he tells me, so I'm a wee bit envious of that. And then where I work now, on the Wrexham Industrial Estate, camera traps have recorded otters on a number of occasions, using the Redwither Brook that flows through the estate there. It's a very unpromising section of stream, but the otters occasionally use it for fishing. And really nice to see them in such an urban area in North Wales. And then one more image from the Little Tern project I used to work at. These images taken under license, but trail cameras were a handy way to monitor the nesting attempts of the little terns. But they can show you so much more, and some of the footage that was collected has gone on to be used by students from Bangor University for their research projects, but we also use them to detect the colouring combinations of some of the birds that have been ringed in the past, alongside using GoPro cameras, which record in even higher quality. So that's a quick run through of camera traps and everything about them. If you've got any more information, please feel free to send questions in the chat now or email me after this event, and I'll be happy to answer them. And we've got more information on our website at northwaleswildlifetrust.org.uk. But yeah, thanks to Danny at Dark Skies Wales for also being on this event, and Richard at Cofnod for inviting me, and my colleagues at the Wildlife Trust. So thank you very much.